All right, welcome back to another episode of Coach's Corner, where we talk about developing human capabilities by combining the mental approach to development with skills and continuous upskilling. Really excited. We have Jimmy Fortescue back on the show. We learned a lot, Jimmy, in our first episode, talking to you about your journey, about being mentored, and then being a coach yourself as you're building businesses. My team talked a lot after you were gone, and we looked at these formulas you gave us and these little golden nuggets and tidbits, and we realized like we only touched the surface. So thanks for joining us again, Jim Fortescue. Would you want to do just a quick introduction for our listeners?
How you doing, Dan? Yeah, Jim Fortescue again.
Yep.
Just kind of a serial entrepreneur, run some some businesses. Had a great chat with you and believe in what you guys are doing behind SymTrain. So a lot of people kind of said, "Hey, where's part two?" Because we kind of left some of that on the cliffhanger, and
Yeah.
I think it's important to talk about what's next, not what you did.
Yeah, and Jimmy, one of the things you shared, and we kind of wrote this down, and I coined it the path to access instead of just the path to success, which is your success formula, right? As we were talking about developing people and building skills for athletes and those sorts of things. And you kind of gave us three things, right? Number one is share and share those experiences and include people, get them out there. That was step number one. Number two was listen with humility, right? And be humble, but be able and willing to listen, right? As a path to success. And then the number three was do that with extreme confidence and drive. So Jimmy, one of the things I wanted to ask you about, which I think is awesome, but also a little bit educational for folks, right? Is being the third person at Annaly Capital and Mike Farrell, who was one of your mentors who started Annaly. But so Jimmy, one of the things I'd love to like hear about is how do you go from building something from scratch, making it a multi-billion dollar business with $250 billion under management as the COO and leave that? That's a pretty important, decision in your life that I think we could learn from. Can you tell us a little bit more about that decision process, Jim?
Well, as you can imagine, that's a big question, and let's just be very, specific. None of that is ever easy, right? And the easy
Right.
thing actually sometimes is to just stay on the gravy train, right? You build something and you know, um, it's turning out much better than you thought, and the journey was so hard and whatever. And you met so many amazing people along the way, but um, I think that when culture changes sometimes, or when the learning stops, right, or people don't see the same path for themselves, right? Like sometimes they kind of jump off, right? So, and
Yeah.
that takes a lot of reflection. It takes a lot of belief in yourself, right? Like, and I think when you're born from little, right, you get less afraid to go back to little. So back to all those things that you said, and humility and stuff like that. And you wish people the best, and then you start to kind of focus on what can be the future.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially when it's a big part of your legacy. And when we talk about the future, you did get into some other ventures, right? Which were equally or successful, just like an Annaly, right? And US Capital Wealth and Piton, companies that you've started, and that's brought you to start working with some great people, right? As your team members. I think one of the things you told us in episode one is, look, you can definitely help develop people's skill sets, but you can't give them that drive, right? And you need to, surround yourself with great people who are like-minded and want to continually learn and develop. And I think, you mentioned John Paul DeJoria in our first episode and some ventures that he's been working on and that you might be participating in with him. So that's a lot of companies, right? U.S. Capital Wealth, Piton, now other ones that you might be doing with John Paul. I think you mentioned Weber Ranch. Can you tell us a little bit about kind of that explosive growth and areas post Annalie, that kind of wealth management has brought you into?
Yeah, so it all comes down to sequencing, right? So Piton was the first stop, right? And
Yep.
and I started that with a bunch of longtime partners that were the most capable that I've ever seen, right? And we would describe those as a Navy SEAL team, right? Like
Nice.
who amongst you can kind of do specific things very well and sometimes do the same work as 10 others, right? So and can you find something where you're all philosophically aligned and really be uncertain of the future, right? Like, so you kind of test the test and you kind of work on that stuff, but like, and then you kind of reach out to folks to really challenge yourself and say, this is great, right? And nobody, it's hard to just tell people like in wealth management or asset management, right? There's a specific kind of disclaimer, past results are not indicative of future performance, right? So, and you find that out pretty much the hard way, when you first kind of start blooming into a new entrepreneurial landscape, right? So, Piton itself, um, it's a climbing tool, right? It's something that Mike used to put on our desks when we were at the public company, and he used to always say anybody can leave base camp, right? But only the most skilled climbers can reach the highest peaks, right?
Yep.
So, which just takes all the grit and all the stuff that we talked about. So you do need those Navy SEALs and those talented people around you. Um, and of course they have their own things, they have their own goals, they have their own families or people to take care of, right? So it takes constant communication around that. That Starting that kind of company led to a sequence of events that were kind of amazing. Uh, I had met a guy named Kevin Lang through a group called Merchant in New York City. They were buying minority stakes in wealth management companies.
Hmm.
Kevin was a wealth advisor in Austin, Texas, and he had this specific client called John Paul DeJoria, who you had mentioned.
Yep.
And he wanted to go independent, right, and kind of be an entrepreneur, leave one of the bigger companies, and he went to John Paul and said, "Hey, I'd like to start a company, but I'm worried about you, leaving me. Will you come as a client?" And John Paul is this wonderful guy, which we kind of touched upon, prior, but like,
Right.
and he immediately, said, Kevin, I've been waiting for this, right? Like, and you should go out on your own because you're that good and talented. And they started a company called Legacy One. And Kevin was smart enough to share some of the ownership of that company with John Paul DeJoria right out of the gate. So here's a multi-billionaire that, all of a sudden feels like he's inside the game instead of like a fee collection agency because and he was excited for this. So John Paul, within 6 months of this happening, he had started Paul Mitchell Hair Products. It's where this is, was homeless twice, like this amazing American story, loves the country.
Right.
He uh great guy. He's like a save the whale, support the military, like just really just believes in doing good things every single day, right? So like and he started he Patron Tequila after starting Paul Mitchell Hair Products. And in 2017-18 crossover, he sold Patron for $5.2 billion. So Kevin called me and said, hey, you ran this public company. I need help with this big client. And could you come in and really be the treasurer of some of these assets, right? So use Piton, use your Navy SEAL team, and then start kind of managing those assets. And so I was able to meet John Paul. We said simple things to him like, "Hey, if you want to give all the money to charity, great. If you want to, buy some homes for your family, if you want to buy an island, do whatever works. This is a lot of money." So that wire was the biggest wire in the history of Charles Schwab. Anybody who knows anything about the Fed wires, they settle in $50 million increments. So imagine a page and a half of $50 million wires hitting in April. And because I had that experience before, running a public company, and it wasn't 250 billion, it was 125 billion, right? So like
I was
we
being anxious, I was being anxious and aggressive with the history there.
Yeah, yeah, so great. Only I threw a lot of touchdowns in high school too, and as a quarterback that I wasn't.
Good point.
But so long story short, we started to manage that money, and it developed this relationship, and it was about what are we going to do next, right? So, and this multi-billionaire was almost like a human investment bank, right? He was investing in a lot of great startup companies, a SymTrain like entity and whatever. So
We'd take
now,
him on the cap table in a heartbeat.
yeah, right. So like, so so he loved being on the inside. He wanted to know what was next, and like you're spending time with somebody that every day his main goal is to learn, right? So
Right,
whether that was about education, energy, now it's AI, now it was, across the board of, you know, banking and policy and stuff like that and health, right? He spent a lot of time on health. And when he created Paul Mitchell, it was the job was to create the best product that he could do, right? So um and then, but with that, you really have to learn how to cherish a guy like that, right? And, so we would go to his house and we learned to not even ask for a glass of water, right? Like, it's like we're there to give, not to take. And because you're watching everybody else that's around him just trying to grab and take and, come up with their ideas. And
right.
so creating a defensive kind of mindset around some of that stuff when a guy that has been was homeless and has been on offense, was an important kind of key to that, and that just developed a lot of trust. But then you got to make returns, and you got to do what you say. So
Got to perform, Jimmy. You got to perform.
yeah, so that's just a snapshot of some of how that evolved and what's next. But great people around me, great talents, doing a lot more than me just kind of being verbose on a podcast. So.
Oh, look, I mean, one of the things I love, Jimmy, is you talked about, this deep belief, in yourself, but really you brought it up as this Navy SEAL team, right? And I know they weren't Navy SEALs, but they were just great humans capable of exceptional work, and their own journey to self-development and the coaching that they've gotten and continuously improving. And you brought up the same thing with John Paul, right? A continuous learner, someone who's looking to bring this in. And so one of the things, Jimmy, as we talk about that transition from Annaly to private investment and wealth management, I think it's more than that, right? Because one of the things we brought up on episode one is the amount of philanthropy that you personally do, right? And just let's call it charity work, right? So whether it's your work with John Paul or your work with Patron or U.S. Capital or this Navy SEAL team, I know one of your buddies from high school asked you, "Hey, Jimmy, why do you keep going? What drives you? You don't have to, but why do you?" Can you tell us, like, why, Jimmy?
I mean, so John Paul's greatest quote, right, is success unshared is failure, right?
Right.
So I think that if we spend a lot of time and we think back to our parents or whatever, like, and growing up, they would always say, the more you give, the more you get, right? Like, so, and that's what they would believe about volunteers or, and if you really peeled back the onion on why people became a police officer or why they became an educator or whatever. A lot of that was is they wanted to coach, right? Which is they wanted to bring people up and close the gaps on where they came from and where they are, right? So, you know, that guy's probably the best in the history, one of the top anyhow in the history of America, right? So, one of the greatest stories, right? So his charities and all the stuff that we do are called PLH, which stands for peace, love, and happiness, right? So, I mean, through osmosis, you learn by just being around somebody like that.
Nice.
You already had it inherent in you, right? And and back to the onion, some people give because they feel guilty or they about how great their lives are. But most people give because they know that they never did anything alone. And anybody that, you know, gives them any type of service, they're spending time of just being grateful and humble. You'll get a lot more out of it as a person, right? Like giving, giving should make you kind of happy. What's happened, with me, and all the surprise is that, I get asked to run a bunch of stuff or help out with a bunch of things because back to what everything we said in version one, listening, softly finding a solution, not saying I'm right, right? So anybody, again, if you spend any time, do you want to be right or do you want to be happy, right? If you spend time kind of learning about the psychological traits of a good, of a successful person. So,
Yep. You could be right or you could be dead right, right? So
yeah,
but I love it. I mean, look, we brought up the formula, right? In terms of, including people and sharing, listening with humility, but doing it with extreme confidence and drive. I mean, that's a difficult mix, Jimmy. I think, one of the things, we learned from you, today and in the first session is there's this measure of repeatability. I think you mentioned rinse and repeat, right? And doing it with, the Navy SEALs, which you also referred to as the most positive people around you in order to scale. And I think being able to derive success and develop a process and a system for continuing to find success. I think there's more to it, right? Private wealth management and, agave-based vodkas, right? They seem like so different, but maybe they aren't. Can you help us understand, Jimmy, as you balance your life, personal, professional, and some of the things that you're getting involved in? What are the connectors that you see that we could all maybe take away and even help us as we're on our journey of continuous development improvement?
I mean, it's got to work for each individual. It's not like a specific, formula. Like, and I think everybody's trying to make the best decision with the most information at a certain time, right? So when I look again about people that I've looked up to, right? You mentioned how great of an athlete my brother was, but like
Right.
he was amazing. He had these amazing peers that were, around him and stuff like that, that
As did you, Jimmy.
yeah,
The
and that's right.
amazing peers.
Yeah, that's right. So
CJ, Brian,
those
and
are like amazing stuff. And so we brought up Navy SEALs, but we lived half hour from West Point, right? So I saw all these leaders in the Army that, I knew I couldn't do physically or mentally what they were doing, right? So that drive, that desire, that focus, that discipline, right? Like is something to watch, right? And so learning from that has, been amazing. And then I just think you have to execute and you have to over communicate. And I think you said it a couple times, like if you only put the money first, um, you won't win, right? So it has to be, and sometimes you have to play the long game. And it's tough. I think some of the best entrepreneurs have said, um, people quit too soon, and that's why they don't kind of get what they hope for. So,
yep.
hey, being an entrepreneur is the greatest, most fun gift you could ever have, right? Some of it is because you don't get told what to do, right? You get to make your own business plan and your own models, right? Like, so everybody wants to be an entrepreneur. They have fresh ideas. They may not have the capital to perform them, and so aligning and creating good partnerships along the way um, is pretty vital, right? So, but and you really have to just live in the moment, right? It doesn't mean like we could talk about all these great things. It doesn't mean like they're all just kind of like when you said last time I was a good parent, right? It's like for now I am, right? Like hopefully kids turn out to be good good people and whatever. So
I can attest that that all three of them are good people, but in their current state, right? We don't know where they're heading in the future, but as of now, I enjoy being around them. And Jimmy, one of the things you had shared with me is someone had told you, a good coach can change a game, but a great coach can change a life, right? And I love that statement. As a matter of fact, that we talk about a lot of things that drive the passion of SymTrain, right? Coaching people to develop at their highest capability or a capability that hits a service level standard that finds them fulfillment and satisfaction with their career choices. That's we get so excited about that and meaningful impact on people's lives is what we're all about at SymTrain. So I love these stories. I know you shared with us a couple good books last time. You shared a really fun fact around bartender to billion-dollar business owner. What do you think this time? Maybe a movie that we should think about, or maybe even a quote that we can take away today, Jimmy?
yeah, I mean, I have a face for radio, so let's just keep it. Let's keep the movie kind of theme out of it.
Perfect.
You know, I think if a bunch of great people got together and formulated a story of what what people would want to consume, it's very doable, especially the way things get consumed on the internet kind of now, right? I know what movies I would watch. My
Right.
friend Major Thomas Kennedy and his wife would certainly be there. The story of Mike Frau would be there, right? The story of a collective group of friends and athletes that might have won a state championship or whatever would be something that
Who wouldn't
uh
watch that? Who wouldn't watch that,
yeah.
Jimmy?
But the John Paul DeJoria story is amazing, and some of these other companies that spawned from it are like next level, right? So they're so cool to keep learning about, but what happened was, that advisor Kevin Lang is, cherished him from day one, and then get to become part of the team, right? So you have to look at your shareholders as somebody that you're going to put first. And we spent a lot of time as of talking about fiduciaries when we were on um, the opening kind of dialogue. So,
Yeah, Jimmy, what I love is you're a person who gives grace to God. I know that, but what we've found out about you in these two episodes here of Coach's Corner, you give grace to the other people around you, right? You praise those people who have helped you find your path to success and repeat that path. And I think there's something we can all take about that. It's not just listening and humility, but it's truly believing that you're here to give to those people that you're taking from and you give a lot of grace to those folks. So we really appreciate that. Love the fact that you came back. I was eager to continue this dialogue and learn more. And I think our listeners, hopefully they feel the same in terms of just different ways that they can continue to develop professionally, personally, and find this path to their success, whether it's charity work, whether it's a parent, whether it's business, anything that they're involved in, old man athletics, whatever. So, Jimmy, thanks so much. I really appreciate your time and joining us again today.
all right, have a great day. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Jimmy.